What's going on, everyone? This is Kevin here, coming at you with my hands-on and first impressions video of the Samsung Galaxy A17 5G. So without further ado, let's get started. So this is the Samsung Galaxy A17 5G. Now this phone was just launched in August of 2025, and as the name of the phone does imply, this device is the successor to last year's Galaxy A16 5G. Now when I first heard this phone was being launched right now, I was actually very surprised about that, considering that the A16 5G has not been out for a year at this point. In fact, it's not even close to have been out for a year, so I'm not sure why they chose to launch the A17 5G right now, but I suppose there was a reason why, and I've got the phone right here. Now overall, compared to the A16 5G, we're not getting a whole lot of new features with this device. We are getting a refreshed look to it, and I'm definitely a fan of that. We're getting a different looking camera module here, and I also like this finish on the back of the device. But beyond that, we're only gaining a couple of features. For example, we're getting optical image stabilization, we're also getting Gorilla Glass Victus for the display, and then this phone does come with One UI 7 out of the box, which would make sense. So compared to every generation previous, I would say this is probably the smallest amount of improvements going from one generation to another. That being said though, I do have a dedicated comparison video of this device versus the A16 5G coming out pretty soon, so definitely stay tuned for that content. But before I get too far into things here with the A17 5G, let's take a look and see what comes included in the box. So here is the box. You can see very clearly this is the A17 5G, and this is a slim box, and the reason for that is because there is no USB wall adapter included. But included here is a SIM card removal tool, we're getting a quick start guide, and then finally we're getting a double-sided USB-C cable for charging and data transfer. Now with this device, we're getting a very large 6.7-inch display, and it's actually an excellent looking display panel. Now as I mentioned before, we are getting Corning Gorilla Glass Victus here on the display, so this is making things extra durable. Now of course, don't throw your phone on the ground, you probably will break the display in that situation, and overall I do generally recommend putting a screen protector on your device, but I'm still glad to see that here. Now this display is Super AMOLED, so we're getting excellent colors, also really good viewing angles as well. This is a 90Hz refresh rate display, so it runs very smoothly here, and in fact for being 90Hz, it feels a lot smoother than even that. So I know there is 120Hz or even higher refresh rates out there, but I actually think this 90Hz implementation actually works very well. And then One UI 7 as it is a very smooth experience, so that does tie in really well with the hardware that we're getting. Now this display is 1080p, but everything's nice and crisp and clear. We're getting a PPI of 385, a 19.5:9 aspect ratio, and then finally we're getting an 86% screen to body ratio. So the bottom bezel here on the device is a bit thicker than the other bezels, and then up top we do have a water drop notch for the front-facing camera, and that front camera is 13 megapixels. Now this phone is offered in different storage configurations. The base storage configuration is 128 gigabytes, which is actually quite a bit as it is. That's actually the amount of storage that we're getting with the Google Pixel 10 Pro for the base model of that. So the fact that this is meant to be a very entry-level budget phone and we're getting that much internal space is very impressive. But actually this particular model of the device that I have right now has 256 gigabytes of storage, so that's even better. Now this device also features microSD card expansion, so you do always have that option of adding in an SD card if you do want to offload photos and videos, for example, to free up space on your device. So we're definitely getting a lot of flexibility here when it comes to the storage. Now as you probably imagined, this device does not have wireless charging, but we do have a fingerprint sensor mounted on the side of the phone. So we'll give that a try right now. And it's very fast and responsive. And we'll try that again. So that works really well. Now, I know there's other devices that have in-display fingerprint sensors, but overall, this is still very convenient having it be located on the power button. So good job, Samsung, with that. And then also with this device, we are getting face unlock with the front-facing camera. So I do appreciate that we do have multiple methods for getting into the phone. Now, like I mentioned, we are getting a little bit of a different looking camera module on the back of the device this time around. Now we're getting a 50 megapixel main camera, a 5 megapixel ultra wide angle camera, and a 2 megapixel macro camera for close-up images. And like I mentioned earlier, we are finally getting optical image stabilization, and that's for the main 50 megapixel camera. Now I will be talking a lot more about the OIS feature when I get into my full review of this device. I'm very excited to actually give that a try and see if in reality it makes a difference. But here's how things look on the camera app. This is with the main rear camera right now. Now if you do want to get the full 50 megapixels, simply tap here on the 12M, and then now it's at 50M, so that's 50 megapixels. And then from there, we can capture an image, And then I'll pull that up and show you an example. Now 50 megapixels, it takes a little bit longer to take an image. One downside with that. But you can see everything is super crisp and clear. Of course, I'm inside, so when I go outside, I'm especially excited to take some really nice looking images. Now then from here, I'll switch back to 12 megapixels. We can go over to 0.5 to access the ultra wide angle camera. So we can fit a lot more content into a single frame. And then from there, we can go over to the More tab and then go to Macro to go to the macro camera. And then you can go very close up here and have things be in really good detail. So I'm definitely looking forward to playing around with the various cameras here on the device, getting to know them a little bit better, and then getting back to you about that in the full review. Now there's also portrait mode, so you can get those nice blurred out backgrounds. And then I can flip around to the front facing camera. There's me right there. You can take, of course, portrait selfies. You can even crop out for group selfies. And then there is the standard selfie mode as well. So even though this phone is meant to be a budget device, I do at least appreciate that we are getting a lot of different cameras here and a lot of different abilities. Now, similar to how this phone is offered in different storage configurations, it's also offered in different amounts of RAM. Now, based on the region that you're getting the phone in, the amount of RAM will probably differ, or at least the options available to you will differ. But the phone is offered in 4, 6, and 8 gigabytes of RAM, and this model of the phone that I have right now does happen to have 8 gigabytes. So far, everything's been very smooth when setting up the phone. It doesn't feel like a budget device. Everything's been very quick to load. The phone hasn't been getting hot. Usually setting up a smartphone really does put it to its limits because everything's loading at once. So that has actually been a very good experience. And then the processor that we're getting here is the Samsung Exynos 1330. Now I did run a benchmark test using Geekbench 6, and here are the scores that I got from that test. Now overall, these aren't that great of scores. However, the phone does seem very well optimized. But I do recommend running this test on your current phone and then compare your scores to these scores, but overall these are pretty low scores, but at the same time, scores that I'd expect from a phone in this particular segment of Samsung's A series. Another downside with this device is that video recording is limited at 1080p for both the rear and front cameras, so there is no 4K video. And then with this device, we are getting a very large 5000 mAh internal battery, along with 25 watt fast charging. So that is pretty fast. Of course, there's way faster charging out there, but 25 watts certainly will get the job done. And then a 5000 mAh battery, which is the same as the previous generation, does give us very good battery life here, so I'm pretty happy about that. And then with this device, we are getting Android 15 out of the box, along with Samsung's One UI 7. Now at this point, One UI 8 is actually out for certain Samsung smartphones, such as their flagships. So I guess they're saving that One UI 8 update for later on for the A series devices, even ones that are being launched right now. But this phone does come with 6 years of major Android software updates, so at least we have a lot to look forward to into the future. And then with this device, we are getting NFC, so you can use the phone for tap and pay. Now, overall, I think this is a very stylish smartphone. I really like this blue color that we're getting here. I think it looks really nice in general. I do like that this phone doesn't have a reflective back, but at the same time, you probably noticed it is picking up some fingerprints, so that is a bit disappointing. Usually when I test phones with a matte finish, that doesn't happen, but I suppose things could be worse here, especially if it was glossy. And then the phone does have a little bit of a boxy shape to it, but the corners are rounded. Now on the right side here, we have volume up, volume down, and the fingerprint sensor, which is also the power button. On the left side, we have just the SIM card and micro SD card slot. Up top here, we have the noise canceling microphone. And then on the bottom of the phone, we have the microphone, USB-C port for charging and data transfer, and the speaker. And then on the back of the device, we have the Samsung logo, camera module, flash, and that's pretty much it. But this concludes my hands-on and first impressions video of the Samsung Galaxy A17 5G. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, definitely give it a thumbs up. But this is Kevin here, and I'll see you in the next one. Take care and have a great rest of your day.